and there you can see Jen's sort of been the backbone of our clinic for so long with so many people. We have very wonderful. And this is one of our patients who has end-stage congestive heart failure. And one away, and that was very nice of them. So thank you so much. And it's great to be able to provide care for so many people, and I thank people for their patience. Now, next slide, please. My question for you guys is, how old am I? And what would I like for my birthday from you guys? So Amir, how old am I?
My guess is 64.
And Joni, what do you think?
My guess is also 64.
And Jenna, how old do you think I am?
64. Yeah.
Oh, right on there. Gee, thanks. I was hoping you'd say I was 21. But but I guess I'm 64 today. And next slide, please. And one of the things is that we're all getting a little bit older, and as you get older, we want to broaden our horizons and things. And I'm going to show you. I'm in this glider, and this was actually done a couple of days ago. And what happens is you're going to see the launch of the plane. So just play that there. So what happens is the wings are level. There's a guy that's going to be holding the wings. He lets go, and there's a tow plane in front of me, and I'm flying off in the air. And I'm doing this takeoff on my own. I'm actually just a slightly high on that. We'll just play it one more time.
Yep.
And so learning to fly a plane glider is a challenge for an old fart like myself over here. So when I read the manual on do I learn to fly a glider or not, it says if you're over the age of 60 years of age, you shouldn't do this. Only young people can learn this. But I'm very privileged to work with the group at SOSA in Rockton, and this is my 140th flight. And at the end of the flight, the instructor said to me, Greg, it's great to see your progress, but people learn to glide around 50 to 60 flights, but you just persevered. And we were worried about you around 70, would you ever progress or so. And I stuck with it. And over the last couple of months, I made some progress. So I'm still at 140 flights. I'm not ready to fly myself at this point in time. It just takes perseverance, and any change from cooking to eating, being healthy, is a long-term process. So I encourage people to just keep with it, keep learning, keep getting better. And right now, if I asked you to go fly a glider with myself, say no. Your life would be too risky. And personally, I'm not ready to fly a glider by myself yet, but I'm getting closer. And the end of that night, the instructor said to me, he said, Greg, this is what makes it all worthwhile, because when we see you get better and improve, it makes us happy. When I see you get healthier and take care of yourself, it makes me happier, because the healthcare system is in crisis. Next slide. But we all need to do a better job of being healthier and being a good active partner over here. So this is my body composition. So this morning on my 64th birthday, I put myself on the scale, 166 pounds. My body composition is 22% body fat. My body mass index is 25. I'll remind you, ideal is 20 to 25, and so I need to get a little skinnier. I even measured my metabolic age. My metabolic age is 61 at this stage, and I said, rats, I want to be younger, and I'm going to try to get younger. The point of this is we get older, the body ages after the age of 30 years of age. You saw the plane glider, planes will always go to ground, and we're all going to get older. So one of my birthday presents, what I'd like you to do is to join our Fitbit group. And I average 12,000 steps a day. And you can sign up if you go to Dr. Curnew Health. I'm encouraging everybody to really become active participants in their health, and find what you're doing. So what I'm doing right now is I started a weight training program. Who thought that, at 63, you would start a weight program, but it's actually very important to do things like resistance training. I'm eating better than ever, and I'm going to ask these young ladies. I bought some bok choy the other day, and I want to know how to cook it better, because it's one of the superfoods that are rich in calcium and potassium. And So as part of my Thanksgiving feast, I'm going to have some bok choy in there as well. So next slide, please. So please take care of yourself, keep monitoring your health. And remember is that what made you trust is nuclear. When you fly a plane glider, there is a checklist that you have to complete before you go in the plane and start your flight and before you descend in the flight. So your checklist is to always bring your medications, because a great source of error is medications. And this is the most reversible cause of you living longer. So please don't say it's the same as last time. I'll bring it next time. Always bring your medications. And please look at the videos on prescription renewals. Please look at the videos that we produce. Please read the book that we produced. Do something healthy. And right now is that I'm pleased to say is that we probably donated over $20,000 over the last year or two on just sales of books and just giving money away to help others. And right now, there's a lot of fires going around in Canada and in different parts of the States as well. So all the money we collect from the books go to to help fire people, fire victims, firefighters, and things of that nature. And a special thanks to my son Josh, who is fighting fires in Northern Ontario, and he's going to go off to BC this weekend, and he's doing a wonderful job. So my next slide, please. My fire is your heart disease. And if you look at this vessel here, is that do I have heart disease? Well, we know if we look at anybody who makes it to 60 years of age who have passed away, we did a detailed autopsy, 90% have blocked arteries. I have blocked arteries. These young people in their 20s, 25% of people at the age of 25 have some degree of blocked arteries already. So this disease starts early in life. So please take the time to be healthy. The healthcare system is overburdened, taxed, and frustrating. One thing I will say is that my biggest frustration right now is that we have hundreds of people who don't show up for tests and who don't show up for their appointments. If you don't want your appointment, cancel the appointment. There's a great demand. It is, 7:41. I still have work to do afterwards. I'm happy to serve, but I'm no longer happy to have people not show up without canceling their appointments anymore. It is so devastating to me as a human being. I consider people as an extended family. I'm looking after people. If you invite me to dinner, if I don't show up, I call and cancel. You're invited to our office. And so please, no longer, you got to call. I'm so sorry. It makes me cry. And it's driving me insane. So I know if you don't like me, that's great, but just tell me that. And if you like me, I want to help you. So, but please. And this disease called atherosclerosis is a leading killer. And one of the things is I'm very thankful to all these young students who are going to tell us about one way to being healthier, and Thanksgiving coming up. And I'm very thankful to be alive and to be still kicking away and working full steam ahead. So tell us more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Curnew, and happy birthday as well. I think you have a lot to be thankful about today. And so do we. We're very thankful to be here with you tonight. To everyone who's watching, hello and welcome to our weekly webinar. My name is Anjana and this is Junie, and we are the leads of the Cooking Club. And at the Cooking Club, here's a picture of us. We're all about exploring nutrition and healthy eating habits through different perspectives and topics. And we hope that we can impart some knowledge that'll help you make better educated decisions for yourself regarding your own health and health goals and journey. I know this.
So just back one slide, one. So one of the things is that we've had a cooking club on and off for some time. We put that on pause because we didn't have the greatest attendance, and now we're going to restart again. So we're going to. I think we have a survey mirror there on our webpage, drcurnewhealth.com, and we're going to pick a better time. Those who want to come in and cook with us will cook. Those who want to do this online, we're going to do this. We're going to get back to this. It's so much fun. And I know just recently, or the start of summer, we did some cooking here. We have a crock pot here. We have a bread cooker. We have instant pots, and We can do some baking at home different times. So this is a lot of fun. And part of cooking is learning from each other and different cuisines from around the world. So thank you so much for doing this. You guys. Sure. Next slide. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. We're all about sharing. I think community is so important, especially in this cooking club, and what we can learn from each other is so valuable. So thanks for mentioning that, Dr. Curnew. So this webinar is about Thanksgiving, and it's hard to imagine that Thanksgiving is around the corner when it's so warm this week. It was so hot. We had a pretty warm start to September, but nonetheless, as we do head into this fall season, we know that some of you might be preparing to host holiday dinners, Thanksgiving dinners. And yeah, while this is a time to usually celebrate autumn harvests and blessings, this year we want you to be thankful for your health. Just like Dr. Curnew mentioned, eating healthy can be a challenge, especially during the season. It can be difficult to ensure that you're being mindful of your diet. So today we want to combine and explore the history of Thanksgiving and components of a Thanksgiving dinner from a nutritional perspective to help you make the best health and nutrition related decisions for yourself, for your family, and for your friends this season. So join us as we share some thoughts on Thanksgiving dinners. And this is just a table of contents that we're going to go through today. So to start off, we want to go through the history. But before we get into the history, we want to ask a question. What is Thanksgiving? Or rather, what Thanksgiving means to you? I know growing up, a lot of us probably heard stories of settlers to North America and their celebrations of their first harvest, and how Thanksgiving, it's usually generally a time of gratitude and appreciation for life. But we want you to reflect on what you're thankful for. And at least for now, be thankful for the journey that you're making in prioritizing your health and taking initiative in your health goals to improve your quality of life. Being here, watching this webinar is a great step in that direction of that interest in your health and nutrition. So that's something to definitely be thankful for. And Thanksgiving isn't just a weekend in October. It really embodies goals and gratitude that should motivate you at all times throughout the year. So while you watch this webinar, we want to encourage you to reflect, engage, and be involved in your health. Judy, we'll stay on this slide though, just to backtrack to the significance of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving can take on several meanings depending on the person, their background, heritage, and culture. In fact, celebrations of gratitude are found across the world. And typically the values shared are blessings and spirituality, generosity, and giving thanks. And in North America, a successful and bountiful harvest once gave much meaning to this occasion. Today, sharing a meal with others is how we can participate. Just like Dr. Curnew said earlier, the community that we can build around eating can be really valuable to many. We'd also like to take this moment to recognize that given the current state and rising costs of living and prices at the grocery store, this is a time where daily meals are increasingly becoming inaccessible. So if you do have resources too, there are food banks that many are dependent on that need support year round. So we encourage you to consider donating and to spread that goodwill into the community. Okay, so one of the feedbacks that we did get from one of our webinars was that some patients wanted to see some things that were, science related, and also some background on different topics. So we thought we'd introduce the topic of just the history behind Thanksgiving. Hopefully that's a little interesting. So yeah, just to backtrack a few centuries ago, the first Thanksgiving by Europeans in North America dates back to 1578 in the Eastern Arctic, or what is now Nunavut, held by Sir Martin Frobisher around Frobisher Bay. And their meal consisted of salt beef and mushy peas. So that's a very different Thanksgiving dinner than what we would have today. And they celebrated communion and thanks. And then another notable year in the history of Thanksgiving was 1621. And a lot of Americans might recognize this as the first American Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims' celebration of their first harvest. In Canada, the first national Thanksgiving of the province of Canada was in 1859. And that was also intended for religious prayers organized by leaders of the Protestant clergy. And then in 1872, the first Thanksgiving after Confederation was observed as a civic and not religious holiday. And finally, in 1957, Thanksgiving was recognized as the national holiday it is today. So that's an incredibly quick overview of centuries of history. And we wanted to highlight actually the importance of understanding the origins of Thanksgiving and its roots in Indigenous culture, which is something we feel is very important to impart to anyone who's watching this webinar, as it's often overshadowed in history books. and what we learn traditionally. So here are two parallels that connect Thanksgiving in the United States and Canada. The first American Thanksgiving is recognized as the Thanksgiving at Plymouth, in which the English pilgrim colonists who arrived on the Mayflower shared a meal with the Wampanoag tribe and their chief Massasoit. Similarly, in Canada, when Samuel de Champlain held feasts, l'Ordre de Bon Temps, or what they were called, in 1606 between the French settlers of New France and local Mi'kmaq. And what these pictures of feasts between European settlers and Indigenous tribes leave out is the dark history of colonialism and its lasting impacts on Indigenous communities. The traditional Indigenous knowledge of food, nutrition, health practices, and more were imparted to settlers during this time, yet their relationship was far from reciprocal. For many Indigenous peoples today, Thanksgiving is a reminder of the violence, oppression, and genocide that followed these origins. From stolen lands to stolen practices, Indigenous people have faced a cultural theft that must be recognized in history. Thanksgiving originates from a time that must be recognized for diseases like scurvy and epidemics that cost lives of many settlers. And for example, during their first winter, the Mi'kmaq taught the Acadians about plants, herbs, and traditional medicines like pine needle tea that provided sources of vitamin C and yarrow that could treat fevers. So these Indigenous peoples played a critical role in the survival and settling of these colonies and communities. So what we really have to understand is that these traditions that we now participate in today, a lot of them are embedded in Indigenous culture. And actually, gratitude ceremonies do predate the arrival of European settlers and variety of different feasting, potluck, and dance. So it's important to understand the diverse rituals that predate what we recognize today as Thanksgiving in these conversations. And yes, of course, the influence on meals. So the meals that a lot of these settlers had were provided by Indigenous tribes, including the knowledge transfer of agricultural practices and hunting knowledge to settlers. And actually, they introduced them to a lot of the primary components of a Thanksgiving dinner that we recognize today. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. These are very staples. We talk about them a lot at the cooking club. So it's important to recognize where these are coming from and the history that backs them and how that is deeply rooted in Indigenous traditions. So we wanted to preface that just because it's really important that when we're talking about history, we're giving a well-rounded and perspective that's inclusive of the different experiences of the people that reside on this land. So yeah. As we get into this next section, we're kind of going to go through some healthy eating habits. Junie and I are going to dissect the Thanksgiving dinner a little further, but we wanted to add these first just because we know this time of the year can be pretty difficult to manage your eating habits, especially if you're in social settings where it's not always as controlled perhaps at home. So we wanted to mention some of Canada's Food Guide's recommendations for healthy eating habits. One being taking time to eat, to be mindful of eating. That means being conscious of what you're eating, how you feel about it. To eat without distractions, to put your phone down, to put your computer down, to take a minute to go outside, and then to eat meals with others, to connect and share traditions. It can help us establish healthy eating routines and explore new foods. And these are sentiments that, really should apply to our eating habits all the time, but it's definitely something you can work on during this time. And yes, we've just put the Canada's Food Guide here. As we do dissect a Thanksgiving dinner, we want you to keep this in mind, that ideally your plate should look like this, and it should have half of your plate full of veggies and fruits, and that your protein should be coming from lean meats and plant-based protein sources, and you should be choosing whole grain foods. And of course, water as your drink of choice. We have a lot of videos on drinks from our cooking club, so that's something we're going to emphasize a lot. But yeah, just to keep this in mind as we progress through this webinar. And then another thing is mindful eating. We just wanted to expand on what that entails. It means really being aware of your senses when you're eating. It can be easy to overeat, especially when you're in a new setting or you're not focused on what you're eating. And then before you know it, you've eaten more than you really thought you should. So it's important to notice what you're eating, to observe, to really think about what you're tasting and feeling, and then also just enjoy as well. Because eating shouldn't be restricted. It's just about the ways that we find healthy food alternatives and nutrition and eating habits that can make eating enjoyable and nutrition enjoyable. So yeah, we have a study over here. Once again, we just want to emphasize the research on mindful eating habits is pretty limited. There's no standard guidelines on what mindful eating really entails. So there's variation in a lot of study methodologies and surveys and questionnaires and scales. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at this graph. But this is data from a 2017 randomized control trial that looked at the effect of an addition of mindfulness training on weight loss outcomes in a standard behavioral weight loss program. So the study looked at 46 adults with a BMI of around 32.5, and they were randomly assigned to a weight loss program that either had mindfulness meditation or no mindfulness meditation. And that mindfulness practice involved meditation, walking, yoga, but also mindfulness-based eating awareness training. So that includes hunger, taste, and focused awareness and tips for emotional and stress eating and food choices. And additionally, the participants also decreased their caloric intake and increased physical activity. So what researchers found in this was a significant decrease in weight compared to both groups after 6 months, and about a 3-kilogram difference, which you can see in this graph, with the mindfulness group being in orange and the no mindfulness being in blue. So about 6.9, I believe, is for the mindfulness kilograms that were lost, and then 4.1 kilograms for the no mindfulness. So that just shows that some sort of training, some sort of structured understanding of what mindfulness entails can have an impact on your eating habits. So it's something to think about.
So this reminds me of what it takes to be successful. So it just takes a lot of perseverance and trying different things, and there's no magic solution, but just being grateful for the food that we eat, and following the Canadian food guidelines is that and just being mindfulness. You can add an extra 4 or 5 pounds. So it's wonderful information. So tell us more.
Yeah, so from the same study, actually, they looked at mindfulness and the mindfulness meditation, its effect on eating behaviors. They only saw a statistically significant difference between the groups in dietary restraint, but that's still important. And dietary restraint refers to conscious attempts to monitor and regulate your food intake. So here in this graph, we see that there is, once again, in the orange, the mindfulness intervention group, they demonstrated improvements in this control and restraint in their eating after 6 months. So ultimately, this study is one of many that provides evidence for mindfulness in behavioral weight loss strategies. However, that's still a topic that requires more research. But in terms of your Thanksgiving dinner, it's a good idea to implement some of these practices and being mindful of what you're eating and being present, especially if you already know you might have tendencies to overeat or get distracted when you're eating. So yeah, these are just things like Dr. Curnew said to think about, especially, it doesn't necessarily have to be Thanksgiving dinner. The common theme of this webinar is that these are just habits you could build now, and we want to set that goal for everyone. As you're watching this webinar, set some goals for yourself right now, reflect on this webinar, and hopefully those can be long-term goals that you can see lasting beyond Thanksgiving. So yeah. And yeah, so this is just a typical Thanksgiving dinner that me and Junie crafted. And honestly, we're being a little bit generous here, I think. We did some research, and there's some estimates that some Americans can consume 2,000 to 3,000 calories in a Thanksgiving meal. We kind of lessened it to what we would consume, but here you can see this is turkey, 8 ounces per person with the skin on. That's 450 calories. We have mashed potatoes with no changes made to the way it was prepared, so adding butter, adding full fat milk, 240. We have gravy, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. So this is our pre-typical Thanksgiving dinner where we haven't made any interventions yet or any healthy eating choices. And once again, that's being very generous because I don't know about you, I usually don't eat one slice of pumpkin pie. I can probably eat another one. So you can go to the next slide. Awesome. Okay, so before we get into the rest of the webinar, these are just some things to think about or some commonalities that you'll see throughout this webinar of changing up your plate. And I apologize for this graphic. We kind of constructed that as well. But in terms of your turkey, sticking to lean meats, keeping them skinless, turkey and chicken, or even replacing it with plant-based proteins. It doesn't necessarily have to be turkey, but if we're talking about your healthiest bet is probably turkey if you're going to stick to meat. For vegetables, steamed or sauteed vegetables, we're going to look at how you can saute vegetables in a healthy way. I know we've talked about that before in one of our webinars of, eliminating oil too, as it is a source of perhaps unnecessary fats, but ultimately using minimal oils, no butters. And then, we'll get into the unsalted vegetable broth. Looking at the
one of the things I remember is that you mentioned if you go back with that one slide there, you get 400, you get almost 500 calories of turkey, but you can get a lot more turkey if you don't eat the skin, because a lot of fats and half the fats in the skin, and white meat has twice as half the fat compared to dark meat. So to me, if you go to your next slide here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have I don't usually eat meat very often. But on this Thanksgiving, we have a traditional turkey, and I just have lots of white meat, and I probably have way too much. And I put as many vegetables as I can. I didn't realize how many calories. I don't put any gravy on my things, and we have roasted potatoes and baked potatoes with the skin on. So I like this idea how you can actually improve on that. So yeah, tell us more. So you can make it better, but you have to have that piece of pumpkin pie too at the end there, and stuff my face with vegetables and things. Keep telling us more. Keep telling us more.
Definitely, and even Dr. Curnew mentioned, baked potato. These aren't necessarily. We're not trying to say you should prepare your. This is advice that you can take towards however you want to prepare your Thanksgiving meal, but hopefully we can impart some alternatives. So we did put mashed potatoes here, but I would prefer a baked potato, to be honest. But if you are making mashed potatoes, because that is a Thanksgiving staple, we put here to substitute heavy cream with low fat or skim milk or no fat-free sources of dairy, or even Greek yogurt. We'll talk about that later. For stuffing, using whole grains. And then if you're going to use cranberry sauce or make a dessert, Junie will get into that later, but consider sugar-free options or the use of spices. I know for me, whenever I'm making a fall dessert, I always just pack it in with like cinnamon. So you can kind of take away the sugar, replace it with some sort of flavor, especially if you need a little bit of a kick. So that's something to think about. So we just thought we'd put that there as we investigate this plate further throughout this webinar.
All right, thank you, Anjana. So now we'll be kind of getting into that dissecting Thanksgiving dinner type of thing we were talking about earlier. And the first component we're going to be starting off with is, of course, the meats. Okay, so starting off with an important distinction that I'm sure most of you are already familiar with, that is the difference between red meats and white meats that Dr. Curnew also just touched on slightly. So generally the red meats come from mammals, so they're richer in things like iron and protein, and that's because they have more myoglobin, which is protein that binds to oxygen so it can be used for energy. And some of the very typical, well-known examples of red meats will be things like beef, pork, lamb, and goat, while on the other hand, white meat has a lower myoglobin content, which makes it lighter in color, and it's usually from birds. Common examples being like chicken, turkey, duck, goose, and also a lot of fish have white meats as well. So one thing that you might be wondering is, why does everyone always say that red meats are so bad? So really in moderation, some amount of red meat intake could help supply you with some nutrients you need, like protein, iron, but anything more than 2 to 3 servings per week, which is the general recommendation, could be harmful to you. And the higher the intake of red meat and processed meats get, it usually leads to a progressively higher risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, also premature death. And this is also backed up by one study, which found that just having 3.5 ounces of red meat daily led to a whole 19% increase in the risk of diabetes over time. So just looking quickly into the reasons for this, I would say the number one reason is that red meat has very heavy concentrations of saturated fat compared to white meat. And the saturated fat is just very bad because it increases the levels of LDL, also known as bad cholesterol. And that can lead to things like atherosclerosis in the long run if it's not taken care of. And the second reason would be that red meat has something called carnitine, which converts to a heart-damaging compound in your intestines, and this is called TMAO. So all of this combined together can really cause a higher risk of cardiovascular disease over time if you have too much of it. So then on the other hand, for white meats, what makes them better would be that they have lower saturated fat, for one thing. They also have fewer calories and almost no carnitine compared to red meat. And all of that happens while it provides basically the same amount of protein. So they're also often easier to digest, and they can actually help reduce levels of the bad LDL cholesterol while increasing levels of HDL, which is known as the good beneficial cholesterol for your heart. So we can kind of see this distinction between red and white meat better when we look at this nutrient profile comparison. So this is between beef, which is a typical red meat, and chicken, which is a typical white meat. So for the same amount of both, we can see that choosing the white meat would give you fewer calories, less total fat, and a similar amount of protein. And while beef can provide you more calcium and iron, these sources can be very easily made up for through healthier options like legumes, eggs, and tofu. So that is not a problem. What's more important is the lower calorie and total fat count. And also to add further, white meats like chicken contain a lot more potassium and vitamin Bs, as you can see here, both of which help to decrease blood pressure and also overall lower your risk of heart disease.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm trying to do, if you just backtrack, is I'm trying to get rid of salt in my diet, replace it with potassium. And we'll talk more about how that can impact, because there's actually randomized data from China that took people that had high blood pressure, and they were given a potassium substitute, and they got rid of some of the sodium, replaced it with potassium, and actually lowered blood pressure and lowered stroke. And we'll probably talk more about that as time goes on. So yeah. Keep talking, keep talking. Keep us more.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. If you refer to our Loaves of Confusion video, our YouTube video, you will see that we actually talk about that randomized control trial and the specific percentages that stroke was reduced if you use potassium chloride instead of the usual sodium chloride. And you can also buy potassium chloride on things like Amazon. So yeah, you should definitely check that out. And just moving on. Of course, we can't forget about the turkey. And one good thing is that turkey is a very healthy choice of nutrients, even when compared to chicken, which is also white meat. So here we can see that the two essentially have the same number of calories, but turkey does have less total fat, and it's also richer in protein, iron, and an assortment of vitamin Bs. As a side note, also, it's been found that both chicken and turkey could be potentially protective against esophageal cancers and tumors. That's just one thing that we wanted to let you know. And continuing on with the talk about turkey, one important compound that's especially abundant in it is niacin, which is also known as vitamin B3. So in our bodies, niacin is required to synthesize something called a coenzyme, and specifically the coenzymes NAD and NADP, which are very, very essential for cellular respiration. And they're basically required for a body to get energy. So that niacin, turkey being abundant in niacin is definitely a huge bonus. And another great feature is that it has very good antioxidant properties. And right now we'll just do a quick recap of antioxidants and free radicals. So free radicals are essentially very unstable molecules that are constantly being formed in our bodies. They're represented by the red circles in the picture here. And although they are necessary to an extent for our cellular functions, when the number of free radical when the number of free radicals are not kept in check by the antioxidants, this can lead to a state called oxidative stress, as you can see on the right here. And this happens when you have excess free radicals. And what can happen is very intensely damaging to your DNA and also tissues. And in the long run, if oxidative stress is not dealt with, you can develop conditions like diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases too. But luckily, turkey contains a lot of niacin, which also contains a lot of antioxidants to help protect our cells. Okay, moving on. We already touched on this a bit earlier, so I'm just going to quickly recap it. But we thought it was very important to point out that the skin on different types of meats really does contribute to the bulk of total fat levels. And that's just one other thing that you should be mindful of when you're consuming white meats. As you can see here, for example, when comparing turkey light meat versus turkey light meat with skin, you can see that there's 1.7 grams of fat in the one without skin, but 4.7 grams in the one with skin. So that's a huge difference, especially given that their protein levels are very similar. And the same pattern goes for chicken, duck meat, goose meat. Whenever there is skin involved, the total fat percent goes up a lot. So whoever, for those of you that want to watch out for your LDL and cholesterol levels, which is probably most of you, note that it's a lot healthier to avoid eating the skin on your white meats. Okay, and lastly, for plant-based protein sources, we also wanted to include this for those of you who are vegetarian, vegan, or you just want to avoid meats. So just to quickly touch on it, non-meat protein sources are very effective for reducing your cholesterol levels and also risk of heart disease in comparison to animal protein diets. Um, but they all differ diversely in their protein profiles. So for example, things like peas and soybeans are complete protein sources, meaning that they can provide all 9 essential amino acids for you. But then there are others that are incomplete, like lentils, other types of beans. And that's why you should try different combinations out. And like Angela was showing on the plate earlier, you can just switch things out for others, just experiment and see what suits your body's needs the most. And you can refer to this chart on the right just to check the calorie and protein contents of the different types of plant-based proteins and try adding them to your diet as you see fit.
So it's kind of interesting is that the number one source of protein that we should consider for health, the planet, and the environment is beans. It's also the cheapest source of protein. As you know, prices are going up, and I soak my own beans, and we actually grow soybeans, so I have some that's been around for a number of years. You keep it dry, it will stick around for a long time. And I don't worry about this complete or non-complete, because if you follow the Canadian Food Guide, you will get complete proteins from multiple sources. So if you want, is soybean and quinoa, for instance, are complete proteins. I love peanut butter. I like almond butter, and lentils I just find very wonderful. So and here's something just to remember is that there's 3 reasons to be plant-based. One is for the animals, because we're sacrificing billions of animals for ourselves. Number 2, the environment. So for every gram of protein that you consume, to actually translate that to chicken and fish, it takes factor 3. So you have to feed those animals. So it's 3 times harder on the environment. And for red meat, like beef and sexuals, it's 7 to 9 times higher. And so, the methane production that we get from cows and things of nature contributes greatly to greenhouse effects over time. So I'm not trying to be, a preacher or whatever, but certainly is that, and there's also health benefits of plant-based eating as well. So if you want to lose weight, there's good randomized data suggests it's the best source because you get the micronutrients, you get the fiber content. You're better off eating plants as much as you can. But I know we're all have to pick and choose, and so what I like is that is that you can get that. So I don't actually buy beef. If someone serves it to me, I will eat it. I don't, because I don't want to waste anything. But right now, I'm really happy with lots of plants. I love fish, and so I'm a hypocrite. Is that so I need to think about that. But I really try to put lots of beans to everything. And if you want to lose weight, just put a handful of beans into your salads, your plates, and into your soups and whatever. You will get adequate protein. You will get complete proteins if you follow a healthy diet. The only thing, if you're truly vegetarian, vegan, is that you will be B12 deficient, so you have to supplement with B12. But and by and large, people that are plant-based eaters, you have less calcium intake compared to other eaters because you get that from dairy and other meat sources. But you can still do extremely well. And people who are plant-based eaters live on average longer, and they're healthier, and they're thinner, less cancer, less heart disease. And so, and we haven't talked about just, you know, the processed foods that we all enjoy and things of that nature. They're very addictive, and they're bad for us, bad for the environment, and they're leading to this epidemic of obesity seen in 7 out of 10 Canadians at this stage. So I'm still overweight. I'm still fighting for that time, and I'm getting better. And I want to get my metabolic age less than 60 soon. I think I'll do that in the next few months, I hope, with the help and working together with a cooking club. Thank you for help motivating and cooking in the clinic and for just in general. So keep telling us more.
Yeah, thank you for that. Definitely plant-based proteins are very versatile. You definitely want to check them out and add them to your diet.
And they're dirt cheap, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You
A lot
can,
cheaper than meats.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so many reasons to add them either once, twice a week, or every day, whatever you want to do. Is that and also just so know is that women who go through menopause, having a half a cup to a cup of soybeans every day will help decrease the severity and the amount of hot flushes, because soy has an estrogen-like property to it. It's not harmful, it's good, and it decreases flushing. And you also lose a few pounds as well. Tell us more.
Judy, I just wanted to add, we do have a salad webinar that you can check out on our YouTube. And that one we did use beans. We didn't use soybeans, but it was just a way of, you know, just adding beans. We go over canned beans too, just to a salad, something really basic, how you can make a really basic salad healthy. So yeah, check that out if you're interested.
Yeah,
That's a
definitely.
fantastic webinar. I really love that one. So there's so many good ones out there. So please take the time to work it. Look, you saw me try to fly a plane glider. I'm still at 140 flights. I can't fly the plane yet, but I'm getting closer. And whatever it takes you 200 times, 5,000 times, just do it. Enjoy the journey. Get healthier, and surround yourself with healthier people. Keep telling us more.
Yep, for sure. Okay. The next part of Thanksgiving dinner that we want to address is the stuffing. So this usually contains like a whole slew of ingredients like onions, celery, chicken broth, eggs, spices, and bread. But here we're going to be focusing on the bread aspect. So in this section, I'm just going to dive into and recap the importance of whole wheat bread. But after that, if you still find yourself wanting to learn more, make sure to check out our very informational and short YouTube video shown here to satisfy all your curiosities about bread. All right, so whole wheat bread constitutes bread made with any type of whole grain kernels. So this can be things like oats or barley, and this is where they retain the bran, germ, and endosperm parts of the kernel. And this is in contrast to white bread, where they refine it a lot more so that it only contains the endosperm in the end. And thanks to this lower refinement, whole wheat bread actually has so many more health benefits, such as being rich in soluble fibers, which help regulate cholesterol and blood sugar, and also insoluble fibers, which help your gastrointestinal health. So overall, whole wheat bread is richer in nutrients, and it also has anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidant properties, and it also promotes weight loss because it promotes slower gastric emptying. We also wanted to just give one last consumer warning about whole wheat breads. We really think you should watch out for the labels at the grocery store because sometimes they can be misleading. So avoid bags that say that they're made with or enriched with whole wheat grains, because this actually means that some whole grains or nutrients have been added to sort of like an otherwise white flour bread. So the one that you really want to keep an eye out for is the 100% whole grain label.
Okay, awesome. So we wanted to touch on potatoes in specific. We have a really good webinar called the Dash Diet webinar. We go through a lot other vegetables that can be included, and we're going to talk about a few, but we wanted to dedicate a little portion to potatoes in specific, just because potatoes are actually, we know that Thanksgiving dinners can be pretty costly, and they can present a barrier to the variety and spread of your plate. And we wanted to make sure that we include something or a section that touches on a produce that you can sort of be able to purchase during this time of, you know, rising costs of groceries and stuff. And potatoes happen to be a very, you know, affordable, but also very nutrient dense vegetable that is often overlooked. And mashed potatoes are a Thanksgiving staple. So for a lot of you that might already be following a traditional Thanksgiving dinner, it's already there. It's just the way that you're cooking it that can make it healthy. So the potato itself often gains an unhealthy reputation, primarily because of the way it's cooked. So we're not talking about chips or fries, and even mashed potatoes that are made with a lot of salt or butter and cream, like we talked about earlier, and fats, promoting ultimately a high calorie, saturated fat, high sodium diet. So we're going to avoid all of that in this preparation of mashed potatoes. And we have a recipe later on too. But potatoes, if they're cooked appropriately and consumed in moderation with a low calorie diet or a healthy meal, can actually yield a relatively healthy, nutrient rich profile. Potatoes are complex carbohydrates, which are higher in fiber and starch, and they contain essential vitamins and antioxidants that can supplement your diet. And seen here in this diagram, we often use this. I think we've used it in a few webinars, but we like to provide, you know, a little bit of, so you can see what the molecular structure of these compounds are, of a polysaccharide, which is what this is, a starch, what it is, and that it contains these long chains of monosaccharides that are linked by these glycosidic bonds. So we see here above that, you know, simple carbs are monosaccharides, or disaccharides that are essentially single sugar units that the body converts into glucose, which is then used for energy. And they're found in most processed foods and baked goods and breakfast cereals and in refined foods. So because complex carbs have these longer chains of sugar molecules, they take a longer amount of time to break down. So they promote slower digestion, as Junie mentioned, and longer energy storage, which can have benefits in weight loss. They also retain vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, like we said. So yeah, potatoes actually do have a really rich nutrient profile, which is something that I feel people might overlook. And I know that's something Dr. Curnew's mentioned a lot at the clinic too. Just we'll touch on it here, but you'll see there's a big thing over here about the potassium that is in a potato. So if we look at the nutrient profile, we can see how nutrient dense it is, how it's quite rich. Just one potato, how rich it is in vitamin C, in vitamin B6, in other vitamins and minerals like folate, niacin, like we talked about, iron, magnesium, copper. So just a lot of vitamins and minerals that are packed into potato. And so here we're going to highlight the levels of potassium that are in one potato. And we touched on this in that salad webinar as well, but we just thought it'd be beneficial to mention again for other viewers that might not have seen that video yet. So yeah, potatoes can be a really great source of potassium that a lot of people don't know of. And if you've watched our videos before, you know that our current diets are extremely high in sodium. I think we've mentioned that a few times today. And we're deficient in potassium. A high sodium diet can increase our blood pressure. The kidneys are no longer able to process it. The sodium is diluted into the bloodstream and ultimately causes this expansion of plasma volume or blood volume that forces your heart to just pump harder. So this overconsumption of sodium and deficiency of potassium in our diets leads to this imbalance that poses a risk to increasing blood pressure and then also cardiovascular disease. And potassium is the counterpart of sodium and works against it to regulate fluid balance in our cells and subsequently blood pressure, muscle function. So that fluid balance, that dynamic physiological relationship between sodium and potassium is really, really important. And the recommended daily intake of dietary potassium for adults is between 3,000 and 4,700 milligrams. So potassium can help to increase that, or potatoes can help to increase the potassium in your diet. As we can see, Judy, if you just go to the last slide, that, or the one before, yeah, there, that one potato can contain 620 milligrams of potassium. However, if you have a medium baked potato with the skin on, it can have about 926 milligrams of potassium. So keeping the skin on has a lot of, I think it has like, it's like a third of the potassium is in the skin, along with a lot of nutrients. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on and to make sure that you can include that in your Thanksgiving dinner and not feel guilty about that as long as you're preparing it the right way.
So it's actually kind of something to remember is that you have more potassium in a baked potato with the skin on than what you get from bananas. And so to me, is that baked potatoes is a healthier food than banana if you're worried about your potassium intake. And again, is that you mentioned very nicely that you should have the skin on because that's where all the micronutrients are, and how you and to actually I think lower the glycemic index or to change the glycemic index is that if the potato is cold, put in the fridge, it actually breaks down differently. You want to talk a little bit about that as well? Yeah, I know
Yeah.
you mentioned your salad, your potato salad before.
We have it in this webinar as well too, because I think that's definitely
Perfect.
something people overlook in terms of the preparation of potatoes. So yeah, definitely. On the next slide, though, we just have another short-term randomized control trial here. It assessed increases in potassium intake that we know have been linked to improvements in cardiovascular and other metabolic health outcomes. But this specific RCT assessed the effect of increased dietary potassium intake from potatoes, and then also potassium gluconate, so supplements, on microvascular outcomes, including sodium retention in pre-hypertensive and hypertensive adults. So participants were assigned to one of 4 16-day dietary potassium interventions, including a control diet, and then also a diet that included either potassium in the form of a baked or boiled potato, potassium from French fries, so fried potato, and then also just the potassium supplement. So what researchers found was that there was a significantly lower amount of sodium retention in the potato group, and that's the group that had either the baked or boiled potato. So this study is just once again demonstrating that potential for potassium content in potatoes, if they're cooked healthily, to ultimately appropriately reduce the amount of sodium retention. So that's just something to keep an eye out on, that there is evidence that backs that it can help with that, reducing the effects of sodium consumption and that's effect on cardiovascular health, maintaining that fluid balance. And it's quite an easy thing to do. Like Dr. Curnew said, it's just a baked potato, right? It's not that difficult. And it's something that you can easily implement. And we really wanted to focus on this, especially in the salad webinar. We mentioned this as well, because a lot of patients, we hear that it's quite unaffordable to buy a lot of vegetables at the grocery store right now, and they're not, that is an obstacle to them achieving their health goals. So we want to stress that, potatoes are an option if you can cook them properly and appropriately and healthily. They can diversify your meals and make them healthier. And so hopefully that's something that you'll take away from this webinar too, in this chunk of the webinar at least. On the next slide though, yes. So we added this. This is also in the salad webinar too. So if you want to see how I did it, we have a little cooking part there. But we know potatoes are highly starchy foods that can be accompanied by that higher glycemic index. So those with diabetes may want to avoid excessive consumption of potatoes that might raise their blood glucose levels. And I'll touch on it a little here, but if you want to hear more, you can watch the salad webinar. But potatoes contain a starch called resistant starch. So these are carbohydrates that are similar to insoluble fibers that are resistant to digestion. So it's not broken down into glucose and not absorbed in the small intestine. And as they pass through the digestive system, undigested, they actually work like soluble fibers by fermenting in your large intestine and ultimately supporting your gut microbiota. I think it's butyrate that they produce, but ultimately supporting the gut microbiota. And these resistant starches can also help you stay full or satiated longer, thus playing a role in weight loss and fat burning. The retrograded part is on the next slide. So raw potatoes are type 2 resistant starch. Cooked potatoes that are cooled immediately after are known as a type 3 resistant starch or retrograded starch. So when you cook a potato, for example, boiling it or heating it, the addition of water and heat to the starches induces gelatinization, or essentially the swelling of the starch granules. So they're absorbing water, and that can increase the digestibility of starches. However, if you take those potatoes that are cooked and cool them right after, this can promote retrograded starch, so an increase in resistant starch and amylose and amylopectin chains in that gelatinized starch. They're going to essentially crystallize or realign as it's cooling. So this helps basically, I guess, in the term retrograded, reverse that effect of the heating. And the resistant starch is also found in beans, oats, lentils, other starchy foods. So you can watch that salad webinar video, and we put a lot of that stuff in a salad, a lot of very healthy aspects that were added into that salad. So we're very proud of that video. But in this context of the Thanksgiving dinner, if you're making mashed potatoes, if you choose to make that potato salad as well, it's probably a good idea to, after boiling the potatoes, let them cool, and to do so, boil them until they're tender, drain them, and then refrigerate them overnight for like 24 hours. And then, yeah, that'll also help to promote that resistant starch. Dr. Curnew, did you want to add anything?
That was perfect.
Okay, because I know we talked a little bit about potatoes, and that's something that we wanted to make sure it's something that's quite easy to add to your diet. And hopefully you take that away from this webinar as well, because we definitely understand. We've had a lot of conversations with patients about just how they can diversify the amount of veggies that they're eating. So that's something that Junie and I are going to try to keep investigating and exploring. And we appreciate all the feedback that we get from every patient.
Or if you let's say you microwave your baked potatoes, or and then you have to put them in the fridge or let them cool down. How long do you have to let them cool down? Is it the temperature, duration? How do you get to that effect?
So I'm not exactly too sure what the length is, but from what I was researching, it's usually like 24 hours-ish. But I assume that if you let them cool, so when I made the salad, I didn't let them cool for 24 hours. I let them sit for like a few hours in the fridge. But ultimately just inducing that cooling, the reverse effect. I don't know what it would look like on a molecular structure, but I think at least the attempt for a few hours. I can get back to you on that though. But what I did look up was 24 hours, which seems a bit extreme. But
maybe to speed it up, you can put it in the freezer for like a fourth of 24 hours or something.
Just have a block of potato.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was sort of the section. Just for the sake of time, though, we do want to reference if there's a lot of. Dr. Curnew was talking about bok choy before. We talked about that in the salad webinar as well. Leafy greens and the benefits of those and their nutrient profiles. So definitely check out that video, as well as our DASH diet video. That has a lot of information too about dark leafy greens, legumes, lentils, all the plants that you want on your half a plate of veggies and your quarter plate of plant-based proteins. I'll pass it off to you, Junie.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and definitely stay tuned for more of our in-person sort of cooking experiments too, and seeing what the best way to prepare different foods are, different vegetables. And we'll definitely get to the bok choy soon too. So just moving on, now we'll move on to our next component of the Thanksgiving dinner, which is the sauces. So gravy also, like some of the foods we were talking about earlier, definitely has a reputation for being quite fatty, not very good for you. And like Dr. Curnew was saying, you can choose to completely omit it. But we also just wanted to bring up that there are different types of gravies, vegetable-based ones like onion or mushroom that can offer healthier nutrition profiles. So we'll just be comparing that quickly to the traditional beef gravy here. So we can see that traditional beef gravy has more calories, also more fat, cholesterol, and sodium, all of which you kind of want to cut down on for optimal health. And while it has a lot more cholesterol and sodium, you can see that onion and mushroom gravy, they have lower calories overall, less fat. The best probably upside of these is that they will have 0 milligrams of cholesterol compared to 7 in the beef gravy. Lower sodium overall, and it might seem like they have slightly lower protein, but that is obviously not a problem at all. You can supplement that with any of the white meat or protein, plant-based protein sources that we mentioned earlier on in this video. And yeah, we just wanted to bring up this comparison quickly so that you have something to think about and maybe choose what type of vegetable-based gravy you would want to include if you don't want to omit it completely. And also just moving on, I just wanted to mention some of the amazing benefits of cranberries, which also in a sense are kind of like a superfood. They have a lot of health benefits actually, that a lot of you may know, but maybe some of you may not know. So we explained earlier and touched a lot on antioxidants already. And interestingly enough, cranberries are actually packed with dozens of different types of antioxidants. And among those, there's things especially called polyphenols that are really great because they can help reduce inflammation in your bodies. And through that, they can also improve digestion and circulation. And they can also help to prevent urinary tract infections, actually, through very specific compounds, and also improve your lipid profiles by contributing to lower blood pressure and also lowering your bad cholesterol while increasing the good HDL cholesterol. So yeah, cranberries are definitely something I should check out. There's a lot of different ways to prepare it, of course. Cranberry juice is very good, and later on we'll be showing like a very natural cranberry sauce recipe as well that you can try following. Okay, and we're almost getting to actually the end of our Thanksgiving dinner dissection here. So onto the dessert component of the Thanksgiving dinners, we can't forget the
Fortunately, that's my
pumpkin.
favorite part.
Yeah, always looking forward to it. Can never forget it, the pumpkin and the pumpkin pie. So, pumpkin also is one food, I guess sort of like potatoes. It I guess can be cheap and cost effective, and also since it's so big, you can kind of store it, cook it in multiple ways, eat it a few days later, things like that. So we wanted to take a look at sort of the nutrition information for pumpkins. You can see here that just one serving of cooked pumpkin, just in its generic way, is very low in calories and also fat, but it's high in vitamin A and vitamin C. So overall, this makes pumpkin very, very nutrient dense, but a low caloric food. So it's actually very weight loss friendly as well, just like I guess like potatoes, sweet potatoes, starchy foods of that nature. And it also has a very high fiber content for the amount that it is. So that can also further help to satisfy your hunger and curb your appetite. So that can further promote weight loss as well. Another compound that's very rich in pumpkins is something called beta carotene. And this is actually really good because in your body, the beta carotene turns into vitamin A. And vitamin A, just to elaborate on it a bit, it's important in a lot of ways, but especially for normal vision functioning. So deficiencies of vitamin A can even lead to a condition called xerophthalmia, which means that you'll have difficulty seeing in low light. And that's just one among other conditions that you can acquire if you have low vitamin A. So you should make sure that you have a sufficient vitamin A intake so that it can support your immune system, growth and development, and also reduce your risk of acquiring any sort of respiratory disease or anemia. Okay, and while we were on this topic, we also just wanted to quickly mention how great pumpkin seed oil is because as we are talking about, butter is something that should be avoided and it's often substituted with oils. So I think we, like Angela, we can do like an oil type of video too sometime in the future, like exploring the different types of oil, like olive oil, things like that. But we just wanted to mention pumpkin seed oil because maybe it's less heard of or used on a typical basis. But basically, there is this one pumpkin seed oil study where there were 127 participants aged somewhere between 39 to 63. And the participants had either one or multiple conditions of dyslipidemia, which is high lipid, hypertension, diabetes, or obesity. And these participants were randomized to one of two groups. So group one was administered 1,000 milligrams of pumpkin seed oil along with healthy diet or lifestyle recommendations, while group two didn't get any of the oil, but they just got dietary or lifestyle changes for a total of 90 days in this trial. So some of the data from the study was quite interesting because, as you can see kind of in this graph here, comparing pre and post intervention mean values for group one, which received the oil, revealed that pumpkin seed oil actually has quite impressive hypolipidemic activity. So it successfully led to a mean 2.2% reduction in total cholesterol levels, 10.7% decrease in LDL, and also an 11.2% increase in HDL. So all of this combined, it was quite good at that hypolipidemic activity. And also just as a further breakdown, 20 among those 63 people from group one experienced this 10% or more reduction in LDL, while 17 of those people had a 10% or more increase in HDL. And also, interestingly, 19 of them had a 5% or greater reduction in systolic blood pressure as well. So in addition to that lipid sort of aspect, pumpkin seed oil was also found to potentially have therapeutic benefits for blood pressure as well. So this is something that you might want to look into more too. And I think new research keeps coming out regarding this too. So we'll try to make like an oil video sometime in the future, exploring all these different types of oils and their separate benefits. And as for yourself, you can also try to integrate that pumpkin seed oil into your diet, kind of maybe in like pastas or soups or salads, things with vegetables. So yeah. And here, we just included like a very simple recipe for pumpkin seed oil cake that you can take a look at, as well as a recipe for healthy pumpkin soup. And you may want to screen capture these potentially for future reference if you want to try cooking them.
I think I can feel where Dr. Curnew was headed. But we have we did have a cooking tip here about reducing oil in general. Because yeah, there are health benefits to oil, but if it is an added fat to the diet, there is the opportunity to also just know the benefits and play with those, just with your dietary needs and if you need to cut out fats from your diet, cutting out oil is a good place to start. But yeah, this last kind of section is sort of cooking tips. We have healthiest turkey cooking methods here. First thing, we want to note that roasting a turkey is the healthiest way to cook a turkey. This is pretty self-explanatory. Instead of frying, which requires added oils or added fats. So this allows for the turkey to marinate and roast in its own juices instead of adding extra fats. As well as this, people often brine the turkey, which is bathe it in a salt solution for several hours to allow the turkey to retain moisture and prevent drying during the roasting process. 1 second.
Well, it's kind of interesting. What I do is that instead of oils, I love pumpkin seeds. So what I'm doing right now is that I love the taste of pumpkin seeds. They're nuts or
Organic.
seeds are
Mhm.
good sources of or good source of micronutrients, rich in iron, rich in fiber, but rich in calories. So I'm trying to avoid the oils as much as I possibly can. And but each its own right now. But I just add pumpkin seeds to everything right now, and I find that to be very good. And so tell us more what you guys are doing. It's wonderful ideas. Thank you.
I apologize for that. But yes, exactly. So that brine, although people use it to retain the moisture as it's adding that salt that'll cause that water absorption that allows for the turkey to stay moist and not dry out in the roasting process, as well as tender and retain its flavor. But however, in this process, the meat is absorbing the brine and that's causing an unnecessary source of salt. So the best practice is to roast unbrined. And then if you're eating it already without the skin, there's no need to butter. Often people will butter underneath the skin. There's no need to do that as well because you're removing the skin. And like we've mentioned, that's where all those hidden saturated fats are. So that is sort of one side of it. And then also seasoning is something we also talked about a little earlier, but using herbs and spices in your marinade to compensate for the minimal or no salt that you're adding. I know when I did that salad webinar, we didn't use any salt in there. And it tasted perfectly fine because often herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano, like these have pretty pungent flavors that make up for the salt or the kick that people might be looking for with adding extra salt. And that's the beauty of cooking for yourself at home, is that you can monitor what you're putting. And I think that's also what's great about Thanksgiving dinners is that hopefully when you guys, if anyone takes this information and goes home and makes their Thanksgiving dinners, you'll be able to monitor what you're putting in. The next slide though ties to the oil part. So one thing that we did in the salad webinar is that we did saute the vegetables in oil So actually there is a way to saute without oil. So instead, what you can do is when you take your pan and you put your vegetables on it, you can use a unsalted, or if you can find a low sodium vegetable broth. This is one that I found, but it does have a little bit of salt in it. If you want the flavor, or you can even do this with water as well. And add that and then heat up the pan. You can start sauteing it, and the broth should help prevent any sticking. This is something I'm hoping we can put to the test as well, but you can add broth as you keep cooking to see if it's needed to avoid any sticking of the vegetables to the pan, or if you have a non-stick pan as well. But I know a lot of people often think if you're going to saute something, and that's a common, sauteing carrots or green beans for Thanksgiving dinner, you automatically think you have to put oil in there, but there's ways to do that without adding that extra oil. And then finally here, just the heavy cream that's often used in either soups or mashed potatoes. If you can substitute that for low fat or skim milk or options or yogurts, and consider using plant-based sources like coconut or cashew cream or silken tofu. These are things that you'll need to just assess your own health concerns and whether they're right for you. And yeah, we did a little bit of an investigation into plant-based milks in that class on What's in the Glass webinar, so you can check that out as well. And then finally, as we head towards the end, this is also something we're quite passionate about at the clinic. And after the last time we had a conversation, it's, there's still room for awareness of the risks that are associated with alcohol consumption. And that's why Junie and I felt that it was important to add that in this webinar, just because Thanksgiving can be a time where a glass of wine seems pretty trivial, but really the alcohol recommendations right now are that no alcohol is risk-free, or even a small amount, even if it's social drinking, still poses a risk. So really the recommendation is 0 to 2 drinks per week, but that still poses a risk. So if you can cut alcohol out of your Thanksgiving dinners, that's ideally what would align with what Junie, Dr. Curnew, and all of us at the clinic would be preaching. And also just to note that an 8-ounce glass of wine actually has 200 calories. So along with promoting cardiovascular damage and disease, those added calories are not worth it. So this is something that you probably have seen from our other webinars if you've watched those. The next slide, though, we wanted to talk about drink refusal skills. So oftentimes we're put in these pressured sort of situations or social settings where maybe you're hanging out with friends or family or people you haven't met before, and you're in this foreign environment, or maybe it's familiar and you feel directly pressured to pick up a glass of wine or beer, whatever it is. We want you to remember at the end of the day, you drinking is your choice, that is your autonomy, and that's going to affect your health. And this is easier said than done, but it's not a bad idea to practice drink refusal skills, especially if you know that you tend to feel pressured or tempted to engage in drinking when you're in these settings. So firstly, if you can avoid situations where you might feel pressure, that's a good step, but oftentimes we can't. So secondly would be to prepare your no response. So when people ask you if you'd like a drink, to avoid hesitation, be confident with your statement. And if they persist, prepare a response briefly describing your situation. So for example, saying no thank you, followed by I'm trying to take better care of my health, and I've decided to cut back on drinking to help improve my health and take care of myself and prioritize that. As well as for the third one, we kind of mentioned you can bring a non-alcoholic beverage. Once again, back to that class on What's in the Glass, we have a lot of non-alcoholic beverages that could replace alcohol in there. And then finally, let people know ahead of time that you're no longer drinking, and ask if they can help hold you accountable, especially if you're trying to quit drinking alcohol. If you have a supportive group that feels very passionate also about your journey to quit, including them in that journey can act as a personal motivator and hold you accountable to those goals. And yeah, overall, we encourage you to reflect on how you can pass on your next glass, and avoid drinking in pressured settings.
Thank you. So some very good tips that, all of you should pay attention to. And at this point, now you finished your Thanksgiving dinner and you're wondering, what do I do now? So now we're going to quickly discuss kind of the post-Thanksgiving situation. Okay, so especially as we were talking about earlier, sometimes you just get swept up in the holiday vibes and can't control yourself. If you feel like you accidentally have overeaten or overdrank on this holiday, you're probably not too sure what to do with yourself. And that's why we're going to help and show you a couple things that you can do to feel better and also look after your health post-Thanksgiving. So the first and also perhaps best thing that you can do is really just to simply walk. So there was this one randomized control trial that was done, and it had participants engage in just some sort of physical activity, 15 minutes post-meal and also around 30 to 45 minutes post-meal. And as you can see the results on this graph, it showed that engaging in some sort of physical activity around 30 to 45 minutes after eating significantly helped to improve insulin responses and also lower the participants' blood glucose levels. So yeah, after your Thanksgiving dinner, going on even like a 10-minute low intensity sort of walk around like 30 to 45 minutes after you're done eating can really help to balance out your blood sugars. And that's just one thing that you should be mindful of and just remember that when you have your Thanksgiving dinner. One other thing that we wanted to mention is also that it's okay if you feel like you aren't able to walk too much. Like if you can't get like 10,000 steps in daily, that's no problem at all. We just want to point out that there was a recent study conducted in July of this year, actually, so just a couple months ago, and they found that doing just 4,000 steps a day helped decrease the risk of all-cause mortality, and also just 2,340 steps a day decrease the risk of cardiovascular mortality. So we just wanted to bring up those numbers here and just point out that even if you can only get in like 2,000 to 4,000 steps daily, that's still doing quite a big, contributing quite largely to your health. Okay, and next thing that you can do after post-Thanksgiving meal is to take note of which foods to avoid and which ones to maybe have more of. So any sort of dairy product with lactose in it could be hard to digest after a big meal. So that, for one thing, is something you should avoid. And next on the list, of course, is like fried, fatty, and processed foods. It really goes without saying that you should be avoiding these on a regular basis, but especially after a large meal, you want to help out your digestive system rather than slowing it down or burdening it even further. So definitely avoid those high-fat foods. And lastly, avoid alcohol because you don't want to become more dehydrated, and also caffeine-filled beverages like coffee or energy drinks because caffeine is a stimulant. And after a large meal where your blood is already pretty sugary, you don't want to add a stimulant that could make you feel nauseous or jittery. But then in the place of those foods, some ones that you want to have are fiber-rich options like fruits and leafy vegetables, whole grains, beans. Again, beans are very versatile, very good. Peas and nuts. All of these soluble fiber-rich foods will help feed your gut bacteria and also to speed up your digestion when you're having a hard time after overeating. And last thing that you can do to kind of feel better is to drink healthier beverages. So water, of course, should be your drink of choice, and it will definitely be a necessity after over drinking. It'll help to rehydrate you and also to keep all of your digestive processes running. But also milks can also help to hydrate you in this manner. And we've already brought this up before, but just on that note, if you are curious about different types of milk, plant-based milks, and their benefits, make sure to check out our webinar, A Class on What's in the Glass. Okay, so last thing, another special drink that might help you feel better and also just healthier is the apple lemon ginger detox drink. So basically, this can really help to strengthen your immune system and metabolism. And this is because ginger, especially, has been used for centuries, really, in a lot of things from like medicines to regular foods, but it can help prevent nausea and also vomiting because it flushes out your toxins. And the lemon can add vitamin C to your diet, which supports your immune system. And also the apple adds natural fiber to your diet to make your gut again feel more active and full. So if you're in need of a refreshing detox drink, definitely give this recipe a try. You can also feel free to screenshot this one. Okay, and speaking about recipes, this is kind of really the last thing. So we just have a whole assortment of healthy recipes for you here, that you can try on Thanksgiving. And this is sort of what all of our talk from earlier has been leading up to. In the interest of time, we won't be going through these recipes together, but we have listed and provided all the necessary ingredients and also instructions for your reference. So as we go through the slides one by one, please feel free to screen capture these and use them as inspiration for your own Thanksgiving dinners. So this one is a recipe for turkey stuffing, replacing sort of the bread cubes with whole wheat bread, just small changes like that, and reducing or taking out sodium. This one is for mashed potatoes, onion gravy. This is for cranberry sauce. Very minimal ingredients as well, and using natural sweeteners like honey and minimizing salt or oil, things like that to keep mindful of. And then lastly, for the pumpkin pie. Okay, so now that we've kind of reached the end of a healthy Thanksgiving dinner that we made, we wanted to do like a quick calorie count and comparison to what Angela was showing in the beginning of sort of a traditional Thanksgiving dinner that we did research on. Okay, so taking into account all of these components for like a single serving or person, we end up with a total count of 1,058 calories. So in comparison to the 1,680 calories that go into a typical Canadian Thanksgiving dinner, you can see that our version would result in you consuming 622 less calories, which is quite a lot. It's like a 37% reduction as well. And all of this while retaining the elements and taste of a traditional Thanksgiving dinner is definitely an opportunity that you shouldn't miss out on.
So yeah, that reaches the end of our webinar. We wanted to open this question up to anyone who's watching. Just as you've reflected over this past webinar, just how you'll prioritize your health this Thanksgiving and how you'll take those goals further. I know myself personally, I want to try walking a little bit more. This is a photo from last weekend when I was at Provincial Park, Bronte Provincial Park, and we saw some turkeys. So it is turkey season. They are there. They're out. They're so that's my goal. That's what I'm going to prioritize as we head into fall. How about you, Junie? How are you going to prioritize it?
Yeah, I think I'm also gonna try walking a lot more. I think like during the pandemic, I used to walk a lot around the lakes and forests in my neighborhood, so I might try doing that again. Also, just like late night walks are quite nice with like the breeze as well. Just trying to be more outdoorsy, I think. And how about you, Amir?
I learned a lot today about potatoes and how healthy they are. I think beyond just Thanksgiving, I want to use more potatoes in my diet and that cooling method you guys talked about. And I think I could walk a lot more too. So that's those are some of the things I want to do. How about you, Dr. Curnew? How do you want to prioritize your health this Thanksgiving?
Well, this Thanksgiving, first of all, part of Thanksgiving is being thankful and being grateful. So I'm grateful to celebrate my 64th birthday today. And I'm trying to be healthier than I was before. So what's coming up towards Thanksgiving is that there's the CN Tower climb. So I'm looking forward to that. There's the Toronto Half Marathon that I'm going to participate. I'm going to go back to gliding, and maybe I will fly solo this year, maybe not, but I'm going to enjoy that process. I started off today when I got up there around 5 o'clock this morning. I checked a few emails. Then I decided, you know what? There's this hill right next to us, and I went on my bike and I went up the hill 5 times. Then came to the office and started at 7, and ready to still probably have another half an hour, 45 minutes more work, and go home and celebrate my birthday with my wife, who is kind enough to stay up tonight, and we'll celebrate this weekend. But just trying to get healthier all the time, and I'm asking you to just spend the effort and surround yourself with healthier people and make those around healthier. So I think the best part of Thanksgiving is being around family, being mindfulness, and being grateful. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute and to keep working on this. And hopefully I'm gonna get, I hope I can get my wife and my sister-in-law, who does all the cooking or most of it. I make a mess of the kitchen, so they keep me out. And cranberry sauce really looks really tempting to myself. And as many vegetables I can stuff into my plate, and all that white turkey meat, and just looking forward to spending time with family. So I learned so much, and there's all these things, and this is something that would most human beings forget 80% of what is said. So these webinars, that's why they're recorded. You go back and look at, fast forward, stop, go back and forth, and just learn and get better. And so many beautiful pearls in this this webinar. So much to learn about. And thank you so much for everybody. And I want to wish everybody a great night. Any last words of wisdom from anybody? I'm definitely gonna have some beans too as well on Thanksgiving in the salad.
Definitely a salad. Yeah.
And one of the things is that my number one drink right now outside of water is kombucha, and I thank my wife for making it. To me, this reminds me of fancy beers and craft beers. So I have craft kombucha right now, and I'm just saying that there's non-alcoholic drinks, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Unfortunately, I'm going to probably have 2 or 3 pieces of that pumpkin pie. And so I'll have to go out and really go for a big run that day, and the other things as well. So none of us are perfect, but we're all striving to get healthier. I just want to wish everybody an early happy Thanksgiving and a healthy Thanksgiving, and many more to come. So I'm gonna look at this video every Thanksgiving and just get some pearls and how to cook better. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.